To present their product service case study, please welcome Lauren Brown to the stage.
Hello. All right, so, having clicker issues. All right, so raise of hands, who here has heard of the National Safety Council? Okay, before today, who had heard of the National Safety Council? Thank you. And of those people, how many of you actually know what they do? No one. That is the point of this exactly, and that is where all of this began. Yay, okay, there we are. So, National Safety Council came to Energy BBDO about 2 years ago at this point. And they came to us because they were having a major brand issue. They are an organization that has been around for over 100 years, and they work across so many causes of preventable deaths. So they work across car crashes, overdoses, falls, choking. Their mission is to eradicate any cause of preventable death. But at the time, they had less than 1% brand awareness and less than 1% aided brand awareness. So they came to us and they said, we need to do something. We've started to realize that we're so passionate about the issues that we work to eradicate that we've really been putting the brand in the backseat. And we will be able to fulfill our mission of eradicating preventable deaths more readily if people know who we are and what we do. So we first started looking at their existing communications, and it became apparent really quickly what some of the problems were. They were campaigning on so many different issues. Everything looked really different from one another, and their branding was tiny, in a corner, only the logo. There was no consistent look or feel. And so we knew that before we could do anything to start to fight a cause of preventable death, the absolute first thing we had to do was develop a brand platform. And that brand platform became Stop Everyday Killers. And the thinking was, once we have this brand platform, Stop Everyday Killers, we can build that consistency over time. You can get recognition for your work so that every single thing you do fuels the work and the success across any category that you work in. So we landed on Stop Everyday Killers. We loved this notion of everyday killers, really because when we dug into it and we started thinking about what are those things that people in the US really fear. It's like getting hit by lightning, being in a train crash, falling from the sky in some sort of freak terrorist accident. And when it comes down to it, the numbers are actually staggering. You are much more likely to be crushed by a piece of furniture and die than you are to be in a terrorist attack or, get shot at gunpoint. And so for us, this really encapsulated that tension really well, and it elevated their mission to a consumer-facing proposition. So once we had this platform, the next step was, okay, how are we going to bring this platform out into the world? We need to do something that, first and foremost, saves lives and gets National Safety Council credit for their work. And so National Safety Council had always been known for their work in working against car crashes. And that was sort of their first inclination. Hey, let's do something about cars. But we said, listen, there is so much money and so many big brands pumping money into this cause. We actually think there's an opportunity to move into something that is really important and not many brands are talking about. And that was overdoses. So you can't see them that well, but there are a number of organizations working to eliminate overdoses, but what became really apparent is that they were all focusing on illicit street drugs, and none of them were focusing on prescriptions. Prescription opioid overdoses are the largest contributor to overdoses in the United States. And when we started this project in early 2007, overdoses were the second leading cause of preventable death in the US. They have since surpassed car crashes for the first time ever and are the #1 leading cause of preventable death in the US today. Opioids and prescription opioids account for over half of all opioid overdoses. So we saw this as a huge opportunity for National Safety Council. It was a place where they could make an immediate impact and save lives. It was incredibly important, and no one else was doing it. So we started digging in. We did all those planner things. We talked to people. We consulted with academic experts and government experts. We read a million things, and we started conducting interviews with people who had lost loved ones to the prescription opioid crisis. And a few things started to emerge that felt really incongruous with each other. So talking about like that data point over here and that data point over here, that's exactly where we landed. So research showed us that Americans know there's an opioid crisis. Talk to anyone in the country and they'll be like, yes, of course, I see it on the news all the time. But then on the other side, no one felt that they themselves were vulnerable or susceptible to it. It was this thing happening where it was like, oh, that's a problem for those addict people. That doesn't happen to people like me. And so with these two facts, we realized, wow, this is really something that's driving this. If you don't think that you're susceptible, you'll never take precautions, and you'll never take the actions to prevent addiction before you realize it is something that can happen to you. 22,000 people die every year from a prescription opioid overdose, and none of those people started as addicts. They started as regular people living their lives, and something happened to them. They had an injury, they took a pill at a party, and it developed into an addiction that stole their lives. So that really led us to our insight, which was Americans know prescription opioid addiction is a problem, but they think it's killing someone else. They think it's killing addicts, not people like them. And so with this in hand, we launched a program called Prescribed to Death. Prescribed to Death was a memorial to the victims of the opioid crisis. And everything we did, all of the language that we used within this program was very intentional because it was preventable. So these people really were victims. The program had a three-pronged comms strategy. The first thing we had to do was make it personal. People had to see themselves in this crisis in order to be willing to take an action. The next thing we had to do was educate on opioids. So National Safety Council ran a national survey on drug abuse, and they found some pretty staggering numbers that just showed general ignorance about what opioids are, how they work, how addictive they are, and even if people are taking them themselves. And then the last thing was, okay, now we've told people why this matters. We've given them the education. We can't just say, here's a terrifying problem, good luck. Like, what are we actually gonna give them to do about it once they have that moment of recognition and they're in a place where they are ready to take action and protect themselves or their families? So the first thing, making it personal. The centerpiece of this program was a memorial wall. This wall was 22,000 pills with faces carved into them of the 22,000 victims of the opioid crisis. 22,000 is a number from 2016. If we were to do this today, it would be almost 40,000. To make these faces, we gathered images of people who had died from prescription opioid overdoses, and we worked with engineers to create models of them, and then those models were printed using a CNC machine. On site, our CNC machine created a new face every 24 minutes, because that's exactly how often someone in the US dies from a prescription opioid overdose. And then those pills were added to the wall in real time. As part of the installation, we filmed 3 videos of family members of people who had died from prescription overdoses. And at the memorial itself, these videos played in tiny bedrooms that were recreated from the belongings of these 3 people who had passed away. And then these videos really became the avenue through which this very localized experience could be shared with the nation. These 3 videos are sort of this inverted L. And then this top video on the left is a video that showcases people interacting with the wall, because on-site visitors could scan the wall to interact with victim stories. It's something that was also replicated in a digital memorial that, again, is sort of how we took this very physical thing and brought it out to the nation. I'm just gonna play one video quickly.
I should have asked questions. I didn't ask enough questions. Every Sunday, him and I would go to Barnes & Noble. I would always find Michael sitting on the floor, looking at the new comics. I wasn't thinking anything at all. It was a medication that was prescribed by doctors. Michael needed it, and as far as I was concerned, that was part of his maintenance routine. He had a great sense of humor, very dry, very bright. He was just a boy. He was a good boy. And I went looking for Michael, and I heard Julie yelling, "Michael, open the door." There was Michael. He was laying on the floor. I remember kneeling next to Michael, and I had a hand under his head. I told him everything was going to be okay, and he took his last breath. This wall has 22,000 pills, each carved with a face. Michael's story is just one of them. That's Michael's story.
Really sad. So these videos were playing at the memorial, and they really were how we got the National Safety Council's word out. But that wasn't everything. Sort of in tandem with personalizing the epidemic, it was really important that we educate. So we made a ton of educational materials answering some of those things that I mentioned earlier. What are opioids? How likely are you to have them in your home? What are questions that you can ask your doctor if you're ever prescribed opioids? And most importantly in all of this was that National Safety Council wanted to save lives. That was the #1 mission going into this. And so we started thinking, what is an action that is something that we can trigger that actually can have life-saving potential? And what we realized after National Safety Council ran their national survey on drug abuse was that 1/3 of people taking opioids don't even know that they're taking opioids. And so it became evident to us that this very simple action of having a conversation with your doctor and saying, I want to be warned if I'm given opioids, and I want to discuss alternatives, could truly be life-saving. And so we developed a Warn Me label. The Warn Me label is a simple sticker, and you put it on your insurance card, and it indicates to physicians, to pharmacists, that if they give you an opioid, you want them to tell you. And we ran studies in our office when people had wisdom teeth out and injuries, asking doctors, are you giving me an opioid? And many times they said, oh, I don't know. And they would go check, and they would say yes. But it's something that consumers have to proactively do in order for that life-saving benefit to happen. And so if you're familiar with BJ Fogg at all, you know behavior is motivation, ability, and a trigger. So motivation in the first 2 phases, by making it personal, by educating you on the risks. Ability, by making it so simple, because it's sitting on your insurance card when you go to pick up your medication. And trigger also, embodied within that simple sticker, is a trigger to start that conversation when you otherwise might not feel comfortable asking a doctor. And so we developed tons of materials both to educate consumers on how to use the sticker and simultaneously to engage physicians and pharmacists and let them know these questions are coming your way. You need to be prepared to answer them, and you need to be ready to have these conversations with your patients. And so this is the case study. It's about 2 minutes long, and then we have 1 minute, but I'm going to keep you a minute over.
Take a look at these pills. Each one has a face carved into it.
A haunting yet beautiful and powerful new memorial.
A traveling tribute, if you will, to families hard hit by a national epidemic.
Okay, so there's something that I would like to show you. A room next door here that I would kind of remind you of what you had in your hands.
Okay.
Okay?
Let's go.
The National Safety Council created a memorial. It features 22,000 carved medicine pills, each of them bearing the face of someone who fell victim to the crisis.
22,000 pills. A new pill will be etched on site every 24 minutes.
That's how often a person in the United States dies from an overdose of prescribed painkillers.
This is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's son, this is somebody's husband, this is somebody's brother.
I get overwhelmed every time I see the wall because I was really close to being on this wall myself.
I never actually thought about my addiction too much. Now it's really making me see things more clear.
And so the biggest risk to them may be sitting in their medicine cabinet and they're not acknowledging it.
The Warn Me label that they can affix to their insurance card that says, hey, I want to talk about drugs that are prescribed to me.
So going into this, National Safety Council had two goals. They wanted to save some lives, and they wanted to get credit for saving lives. We absolutely blew our goals out of the water. Going into this, we said, if we can get 100,000 people to adopt a life-saving behavior, that will be such a win for us. To date, we've distributed over 1 million Warn Me labels, and we have requests coming in constantly from employers who want to hand them out at work, from organizations. We are currently in the process of working with an insurer to get it put on all cards that they distribute, and we're also in works to get it put on digital medical records. But most importantly, we changed perceptions, right? Like the behavior doesn't matter if you don't think that you need to do it. And people exposed to the campaign were 31% more likely to talk to their doctors about opioids, and believed 2.5 times more than those who had not been exposed that opioids were a relevant threat. And then lastly, National Safety Council. They got the most attention of their lives. We went into this and we said, if we can get 1 billion impressions, it's unlikely, but you can set lofty goals. And we got 2.4 billion. And what really drove this forward was that the attention of our memorial, the media attention, drove the White House to invite us there. And that set off this domino effect of other cities who have been hit by the opioid crisis inviting us there as well. So we're currently on a roadshow to 15 cities with more invites coming every day. And all of this, of course, drove awareness of National Safety Council and tons of social conversation around National Safety Council, which really is what they need, because if you know who they are, you know what they do, and then you can support all of the work that they do to help save lives in the US. And of course, I have to show this photo on the right. because we're like, look where we got to. But whatever your politics are, this was incredible. It got people from both sides actually to come to the DC Memorial and talk about this very serious issue confronting our country. And then a final thing that I'll say, because I know I am over time, is that the point about working versus non-working budget is something that we really discussed at length on this project. Printing 22,000 tiny faces onto pills is very, very expensive. We believe in the creative potential of this breakthrough activation, and it will earn us so much more in media than we could ever afford in traditional channels. So that was a really big lesson for us and for our client, to have faith and creativity to be effective. Thank you.